Hello everyone, great to have you on board for episode 15 of Rugby Nation. As always, Iain Payten in the house, and today a special guest, Mr. Tom Carter. TC, great to have you on board. Looking forward to getting your insights, your wrap and your preview for the Super Rugby final. How you doing? How'd you enjoy the weekend, the Brumbies up against the Jags?
Yeah, look, it was obviously a little bit disappointing, the result for Australian rugby, but obviously great for the Brumbies to make the semis. And yeah, it should be a really good final this weekend.
We spoke about the travel factor last week. We said it didn't matter. Well, evidently it does matter a little bit when you want to go from Canberra to Buenos Aires. Blown out early, the Brumbies.
Yeah, I mean, it has to matter, right? Like, you can talk yourself out of it or you can talk yourself into it, whichever works. But, look, I said it last week, it's a bit statsy, but since 2016, the home team has won every single semi-final.
Every home team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's something in it. There's a travel factor. There's the sleeping in your own bed. Maybe it's just the extra day of preparation. I don't know. It's not an excuse, but it's a factor.
Where do you reckon it started to unravel for them on the weekend?
I think set piece, which I think is a pretty good precursor to the World Cup and Rugby Championship, is obviously they were the dominant set piece in the competition. But if you can't win your own ball at line out and scrum time, and then you start chasing a game, which I think will be fascinating in the World Cup, if teams get ahead, does that scoreboard pressure affect how they play?
The line-out melted, didn't it, really? You know, like they shelled 5 line-outs, which is normally just bread and butter for them. And they've got, you know, Rory Arnold, who's 9'2". So there was things going wrong with the execution of that line-out. And as you say, it went from there.
Important that we don't get too down on them as well, guys. In the end, it was a really good year for the Brumbies. They posted 7 straight, first time ever. When you consider some of the other Brumbies teams that have cut around in years previous, they've never managed that 7 straight across the season. So some nice takeaways, I reckon, from 2019.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they obviously did it without David Pocock, which is even a bigger rap. Happened to be missing one of the world's best players. I suppose the question everyone, I guess, is thinking is who replaces Christian Leofiano, their spiritual leader and 10 for next year. But they're obviously developing some good young coaches there with Pete Hewitt and Dan McKellar. They've done a great job. They played some really good rugby. It was probably less structured than they'd previously played under Jake White's era. So, yeah, great year for the Brumbies.
I like that their coaching staff has a mixture of young and grizzled. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you need a grizzled.
Laurie Fisher.
A bloke in a bucket
grizzled.
hat. Yeah, straight from Game of Thrones, Battle of King's Landing.
Yeah, or he could quite easily have an eye patch and be leading some kind of a pirate outfit, you know.
Yeah.
At any stage,
Some sort of
swashbuckling
rolling maul.
Oh, he's a ripper, Lord Laurie Fisher. So they've got a nice mix there going forward. They'll be on deck again next year. A couple of changes to come, and as you mentioned, Tom Carter, Christian Leofiano's replacement, long term still to be determined. So the Jags move ahead to the big one.
Can I just butt in before you move on from that? I really hope that we don't see that last performance reduce the number of Brumbies players in the Wallabies squad. They've been the form players of the year, and I think that for Australia to be successful at the World Cup, we must pick form players. So let's hope that's not.
I was going to say that to our whole Wallabies chat, which comes a little bit down.
Okay,
the
all right.
All right. That's why I'm on this side.
Just giving it a
and
bit
that's why you're on that side.
Right.
And in the middle is Tom Carter, who's taken on the Crusaders over in Christchurch many, many times and was watching on as the Crusaders bounced the Canes out of Super Rugby in 2019. How good was that game at the weekend?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I must admit I haven't watched too many games of rugby since I retired, but Saturday night it was one of the best spectacles I've seen. The physicality.
Hold on. You haven't watched too many games of rugby?
No, I haven't.
Retired.
Oh, it's painful.
You coach. You're employed in rugby.
Yeah, I'm an athletic performance. I'm not a coach. I train them. I look at how they run. I don't look at breakdowns. But
they did a lot of running in that game on Saturday.
The intensity at the breakdown was unbelievable. Their skill set. What I really liked was that the Hurricanes got stuck into a couple of the older All Blacks. So Kieran Reid, obviously Ryan Crotty broke his thumb, so he's out for 8 weeks. And what it showed to me is that I think if teams really get stuck into the All Blacks at the breakdown, and the referees aren't so, I guess, open to the interpretations of how they play, that the Crusaders and hopefully the All Blacks are vulnerable. And I thought the Hurricanes were bitterly unlucky. How good was it to see Mwanga versus Beauden Barrett, like at 5'8", and then TJ Perenara at 9 was unbelievable. But in saying that, I think, Ian, you just alluded to it, that no teams, or since 2016, a team hasn't won a semi or a final. The Crusaders are going to do it pretty easy.
Yeah, and the other thing worth noting as well, the Crusaders are now 23 from 23 at home in finals. They've never lost a home Super Rugby final. I challenge any other professional sporting team in the world to have that kind of record. I don't reckon anyone's done that. 23 straight at home in finals.
Yep. Yeah, do many other competitions have transatlantic and oceanic plane trips in between games? But great effort. You have to raise that in that semi that the Canes were dudded
Late,
a fair penalty, and a very own Nick Berry missed the slap down from Whitelock. Look, sliding doors. They lost by 4, so it wasn't like they could knock over a penalty and win the game with that. But there've been a bit of complaints out of Wellington, and fair enough. What does that mean in an Australian context? It's good that that sort of those dark arts of New Zealand rugby players are getting highlighted. This is the sort of stuff that we normally whinge about on Twitter after a Bledisloe game. That stuff happens all the time. Carts, you would have remembered from back in the day, just those little bits of 1%ers and Hoyle's. What does he call it? He used to talk about the
it's like creative
arts
cheating.
Yeah,
is
creative
the way that he
cheating.
described it.
But it happens in rugby games, and they test the Crusaders and the All Blacks test referees as much as they test opponents. So it'll be interesting to see whether that has any flow-on effect into later games this year.
So Crusaders v the Jaguares in the big one. For the first time ever, the Jaguares win through to the Super Rugby final. TC, who wins and why?
I just think the Crusaders, 23 straight at home. I think the Jaguares obviously play a pretty flat line speed, so 14-15 in the line. I think they can be exposed to a kicking game, and Mo'unga's kicking crotties for, try for the winger who's just been unbelievable for the Crusaders, Sefu Reece. I think that type of strategy will undo the Jaguares.
Well, this is probably
You're going the other way, aren't you?
I am. This is probably why I'm no good at betting when I go to the races. I'm not interested in the $1.30 favourite. I want the $10 value.
They're that price for a good reason.
I think the Jaguars can do it. And I think that the fact that they are on an incredible winning streak, I think they're up to 7 in a row now. They've won, I wrote it down, 12 out of their last 13 games. They're in some form. Now, travel is a factor, but these are all experienced test players. And New Zealand doesn't worry them. This year they won. This year and last year they won 3 out of their 4 games in New Zealand. So, yes, I understand it's the Crusaders. I'd probably lose that bet, but I think that the Jaguars, of all the teams in the comp, are the ones that can do it in Christchurch.
I think they're going to pull away late. I think the Crusaders will really stamp it down late in the piece and run away with it in, I'm going to say, resounding fashion late. I just don't think, I think the same way the Brumbies struggled up in BA, I think that the Jaguares will probably struggle down in Christchurch Town. So that's 2 for the Red and Black Machine, 1 for the Jaguares.
Vamos.
Give it the Vamos. I'll tell you what I did enjoy, their pre-game pump-up the other day.
How good.
In the tunnel, just dancing.
Yeah.
Getting that Latino flair going in there. Just hopping up and down. Brumbies, from there on, it was going to be a struggle when you see that kind of energy coursing through them. I need to do the same this weekend, so that'll be 5:30 Saturday afternoon that those two sides go at it. So that's Super Rugby all looked after. Now we turn our attention to Test footy, obviously with no Aussie sides in the Super Rugby final. Coach Michael Checker can assemble the squad a little bit earlier. And fellas, I'm very happy to say James O'Connor looks to be set to return to the green and gold via the Queensland Reds, signing on for next year. And TC, you've played against him. You were around him for years and years in his time with the Western Force. It's good to have him back. Yeah,
it's unreal. It's great for Australian rugby. I mean, I think he was probably one of our best players in the 2011 World Cup. A great story. I think, I think it's about being able to forgive people. He was young at that stage. He was, thrust into the limelight. And it's really good to see him come back and hopefully contribute to Australian rugby. I think it's a great signing. At his best, he's a world-class player. And I don't know how many world-class players you can ignore and not want to have in your setup. So from my perspective, it's a great result.
Yes, well, it's a really interesting development. It's come out of nowhere a bit, hasn't it, with James? He sort of he caught up with Tim Walsh and Steve Hoyles in London recently and sort of opened the idea of coming back to Australia
Via the Aussie Sevens team.
Via the Aussie Sevens team. I think Michael Checker was made aware of James's interest. You have to obviously find a Super Rugby club. Interesting that he's going to end up at the Reds. This is a joint that Brad Thorne has made some pretty strong statements on culture in the past with players and letting them go and so on and so forth. But so if Brad Thorne's convinced about James O'Connor being a new kind of guy, then he's done the hard work already. It must be clarified that this isn't James O'Connor. I've seen it written up that James O'Connor is now going to the World Cup. It's not that at all. It's in the same category as Nick White. He's coming back to have a go, have a crack at making that squad. He'll train with the Wallabies purely because Michael Checker needs to have a look at him. There's no point in him going back and playing club rugby and trying to be assessed at that point. There's no guarantees. In fact, as much as I'd like to think that the 2011 James O'Connor would be an asset, I think he's a very different player now. And having watched a little bit of him in Sale, he's had some injuries. He's lost a yard or two of pace, but there's definite class there. Will he make the World Cup squad? I think it's a really long shot. But
you think so?
I think it's a long shot. Yeah.
Do you?
Yep.
I mean, we've still got to get through so much footy between now and then anyway. There's still the Rugby Championship to go before the World Cup.
There is,
but warm-up game against Samoa.
Think about it like this. Does he go straight into the Rugby Championship teams, like without having seen anything in between? I think it's great that he's having a crack at it. Let's say Nick White, who has been playing for Exeter, the quality of his football. They've been playing right up the top of that league. James has been playing for Sale, playing in the centres. He's had some injuries, so you got to base a few decisions on that form as to whether they go into the Wallaby squad before the World Cup. You need to see them play some Test football before the World Cup.
How much Test footy does he need to play before?
Oh, I think only 1 or 2 games. I mean, I think we talked about how good the Brumbies season was, but ultimately, how did the Reds, Rebels and Waratahs end up? And I just think at fully fit James O'Connor, he can either play 10 to help support Bernard or Christian. He can play 12. He can play 15. He had so much utility value. He's been to a World Cup before. Like, that's the other thing. Like, it was a long time ago, but he's done it. He's been there, done it.
So how old was he in 2011? Let's backtrack to that 2011 when he
would have been 20, 20,
he was probably one of the best, 2021.
Yeah, he definitely was, but he was sort of one of those nomads. Like he played 5'8" ultimately and has moved into the inside backs. But he was on the wing at that time when he had the young legs of a 20-year-old, and he was an outstanding.
Game against Ireland where he raced back and mowed down, who was it, Rob Carney maybe, or Tommy
one of the
Bowe,
wingers,
one of those two?
After Quade's behind the back.
Yes. You're right, TC. He was good in that World Cup.
I'm not sure. I think I really like the idea that they're going to have a crack, and I think the words that I heard out of Wallaby World was that Check is not going to leave that stone turned.
Right.
He's going to have a look at him. Is he automatically, based off his past reputation and what he's done for Sale, is he above, a Henry Spate or is he above a Tavita Kurandrani or a, you know what I mean? Like he needs to prove a lot in a short space of time. And as much as I like the idea of him being back, I think it's a long-term project.
Well, the good news is that the depth increases across the backs, and the man in charge now of shaping the Wallabies' attack through the Rugby Championship and the World Cup is Shaun Berne. He was appointed last week, and you caught up with him, Pato.
Had a quick chat on the phone with Shaun, and he's a very understated character, isn't he? He's very Randwick. They all sound alike. But we raised his appearance on our show last week via Goog's anecdotes. But we also raised, you'll remember this, Cuts, were you around in 2003 when Shaun Berne kicked a penalty after the siren against the Crusaders to win at the SFS. This is a good sort of 11 years before Bernard Foley made fame by doing it in the final. And I mentioned to him that you couldn't actually find vision of that on YouTube, but I think we've got the audio and we can roll it. But he raised that you had already dug that vision up, and he had an issue with it as well. Let's have a listen.
Yeah. Actually, Sean Maloney, I had the same issue. I couldn't remember a few years ago when I was in Dublin. I was like, "What's your greatest moment in rugby?" And I said, "Well, I had a good moment, which and I couldn't find it. And then Sean Maloney did a buzzer beater. If you type in top 5 buzzer beaters,
Yeah, right. It's in
it
there.
comes up. I want to talk to Sean Maloney because he's put in as number 5, when in my head it's number 1 every day of the week.
This week, I've been chasing down classic matches that have gone right down to the wire. Matches that had you on the edge of your seat, chewing your nails and going, "Aye!" Righto, let's get into them right now. Top 5 buzzer beaters of all time. Feast your eyes on this. Number 5, Shaun Berne, SFS, Waratahs against the Crusaders from the car park. This is our house, says Bernie. Over it goes. Terrific celebrations. Look at them. Takiri, Turanui, a cast of thousands, and Phil Kearns. Hello, mate.
So just confirming that Shaun Berne in a regular season game at home when the Tars were flying is better than a World Cup win in extra time off the boot of Johnny Wilkinson.
Yeah, well, that's obviously his view.
It's a state of complete delusion.
Well, it's good. Listen, put it this way: this guy's now in charge of the Wallabies backline. He's aspirational.
Were you playing in that game?
optimistic.
Were you there in 03?
No, I was in the Waratah Academy. I was there,
A
though.
bit later, you were
Yeah.
there that night for it.
Yeah, I love the bit, though, Randwick and understated. I love how you threw that in there. Yeah, that's interesting. And then claiming you're better than Johnny Wilkinson.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
So that's Shaun Berne ticked off. Let's quickly rattle through the All Black squad, which has just been announced as well. The big inclusion, Sevu Reece, no surprises there. He's been a freak all season long for the Crusaders, has topped the try-scoring charts through one final game to go. Braden Ennor, again, other Crusaders. George Bridge, who's a try-scoring freak for the Red and Black machine too, as well as Brad Webber. Nice little inclusion out of the Truths.
Severus, as you say, been outstanding all year. Number 9's going to be an interesting one for the All Blacks, isn't it? Brad Webber's arguably been the best 9 in the comp, and he's probably slotting into number 3 role in that squad. So, I mean, that All Blacks squad is ridiculous. You could put a very decent team together of players who missed out. One of whom was Ma Nonu, and there was no Akira Ioane as well. So, it's just kind of the shake your head territory. And they All Blacks, short price favourites for the World Cup for a reason.
Good squad, and they will ask, all types of questions across the Rugby Championship, which is just around the corner. Before we get to that, we've got the Oz Women's Sevens team that we can tick off now with as well. TC, can't let you go without getting a bit of an update on what's cracking there. You're back from Biarritz. The women at the moment are having a bit of downtime. I've noticed their Instagram profiles. A lot of beach shots from up and down the coastlines of Europe. That seems to be what's happening at the moment. What are you, while they're doing that, what are you doing back here at Rugby HQ?
It's they've on a well-earned break, obviously qualified for the Olympics, which is a great result. So trying to be the first team, I suppose, to defend their Olympic title after being an inaugural sport. So they have 3 or 4 weeks off, and then we're in prep for, I guess, the 8 World Series tournaments next year, and then obviously the big focus in Tokyo. So, it's an exciting time for Australian Sevens rugby. Some really good young girls got exposed to some playing tournaments this year, and then obviously we've got the 8 returning medalists from Rio. Very exciting, busy planning and sort of just trying to, I think that's the fortunate thing being qualified. You can probably be a little bit more extensive in how you manage people into the Olympic cycle and ensure that we're in tip-top shape for next year.
Love to know how Emily Cherry is placed to make her potential return to the green and gold as well. Has just celebrated the arrival of a little one.
Yeah, the GOAT has had a kid.
Goat Junior.
GOAT Junior.
Do you reckon that's just the name you roll with? I just would have called it first name Goat, second name Junior.
Yep.
Goat Junior
Goat
Cherry.
Junior Cherry.
How does that work?
Yeah.
That'll work?
Yeah, that works.
So, obviously, I was going to ask a lot of questions of Em's body, and remembering she is one of the greatest Sevens players we've ever seen. How hard is it for her to put herself in a position to be considered again to try and defend her gold medal in Tokyo?
Yeah, look, I think we've sort of put in a few systems and processes and spoken to some consultants around what the best path back for her is, but ultimately there is no definitive time. It's just about how her body responds and I guess how she feels comfortable about that, and then it's just a gradual progression to returning like most women post-pregnancy, returning to exercise, returning to normal everyday life, and then I guess once it gets to that point, we can start to look at those conversations around a time frame. But from our perspective, it's probably about her enjoying being a mum and spending time with the little one for now and yeah, look, it's a pretty unique and incredible experience that she's been able to do that. And yeah,
Do you guys have
congratulations.
a plan A, plan B, plan C kind of
Yeah.
thing? Like, how many tournaments? It's Emily Cherry, so how many tournaments and how fit does she have to be out from the Olympics
None.
to
She
get
just
it?
goes
Well, this is
straight
what
in.
Yeah, like
Today.
you'd have to be at a certain level and play one or two tournaments. Maybe.
That was the thing that's blown me away is how hard they train as a group. Like, they're incredibly impressive how hard they run. And obviously that's why they've been so successful, their touch football background as well. So I think it's being able to accumulate some training volume, and then that would obviously make that decision a lot easier. But I agree. I think she's proven it time and time again how good she is. So it's just about getting her physically capable through training.
And the rest of them will head off with you to Ottawa in the coming months.
Yep, off to Tokyo for a bit of a recce. I think that they're talking about it being the hottest Olympic Games ever, so it's a really good opportunity for us to get exposed to the heat and spend some time together over there, and then build into, I think, the first tournament of the year. We've got Aon 7 series first, and then in the first tournament of the year in Colorado.
Right around the corner.
Let's throw it forward.
Glendale.
Let's throw it forward to Olympic Games. Girls have defended their Olympic title. It's a scary thought. Do you get a gold medal?
I wouldn't feel comfortable.
Comp Carter
No,
work?
I don't think so. And to be honest
Strength
with
and
you,
conditioning one.
there was Tom
Would you
Carter.
get up on
There was
the-
Tom Carter, the rugby player, and then there's Tom Carter, the coach. So I'm happy to be in the background periphery. You don't even know that
You
I'm
wouldn't
there
be up
set
on
from
the
the show.
Can you be
No.
up on the
I'd
podium?
flog Johnny Manetti's lickety split. Like, I'd just take it. He'd look that way, and I'd just say, thanks, big man. That's mine. And he'll never know. I mean, he'll never know. It's gone.
All I'll say is I'd celebrate like a gold medalist. That is what I can assure you.
Well, mate, we say sayonara to you and wish you and the women well in terms of preparing for Tokyo. Pato, we'll catch you again next week, and we'll enjoy the Super Rugby final on Saturday
Can you just
afternoon.
take it easy on Saturday?
Oh yeah, 20-year Manly first grade Colts 20-year reunion this Saturday. We've ever managed to get the great man George Smith back from some junket from some part of the world, some consulting junket. You can't keep track of George Smith these days. He's all over the place. I think we've got him back though for our 20-year reunion, which will be taking place at Manly Oval as we watch Manly take on Eastwood.
Does he rate that as the best team he ever played?
Little else. I mean, there's not much to beat in terms of best teams for George Smith outside of that 99 first grade Colts team. And you know what? We beat...
Did you play against him?
No, we just missed each other, didn't we, in the crossover? We're a couple of years apart. We played against each other in grade, but not Colts. But the Warringah team that year was quite strong as well. They had Sammy Harris and Michael Lippman.
Yeah, right.
Michael Lippman went on to play for England. Cam Treloar.
Did Wharf Bar exist back then?
That's early days. I don't think the Wharf Bar did. We used to go to the Skiff Club. I don't
Skiff
think
Club?
Wharf Bar was there in 99.
Wow.
Skiffos.
So
$2 schooners.
So you're going back to celebrate there?
That's not a bad shout. Do you reckon they'll do $2 schooners again for me?
They should.
They probably won't. I'll go belly up. Okay, that's play out this weekend for each of us, and we will catch you all again same time next week right here on Rugby Nation.